Next chapter, nutrition in animals. We have defined nutrition as the whole process by which organisms take in and assimilate nutrients. Further, we have indicated there are two broad modes of nutrition, autotrophic and heterotrophic. We have looked at autotrophic mode of nutrition. In this chapter, we shall look at the heterotrophic mode of nutrition. Heterotrophism is a mode of nutrition in which organisms feed on ready-made food. This mode of nutrition is characteristic of man, all animals, fungi, certain bacteria, and insectivorous plants. Heterotrophs depend directly or indirectly on autotrophs. Heterotrophic mode of nutrition is further divided into three: holozoic, saprophytic, and parasitic. Holozoic nutrition involves taking in of solid complex food and breaking it into simpler forms. This involves a specialized digestive tract called the alimentary canal. It involves ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and egestion. Saprophytic mode is where organisms obtain food from dead, decaying organic matters of plants and animals. Examples include fungi like rhizopas and mushrooms, and bacteria like monotropas. These organisms release some enzymes that digest the dead organic matter, which is then absorbed through the body surface. Parasitic nutrition is where an organism derives its food from another living organism called the host. A parasite is dependent either wholly or partially on the host for nutrition and generally ends up harming the host. Examples include Cuscuta, a total stem parasite; Balanophora, a total root parasite; Viscum, a partial stem parasite; Santalum, a partial root parasite; Plasmodium, a protozoa that causes malaria; and roundworms. A mixotrophic heterotroph has more than one type of nutrition. Examples include Euglena. In this part, we shall look at holozoic nutrition. Organisms that practice this mode of nutrition are divided further into herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. These animals have four different types of teeth: incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. They are therefore referred to as heterodonts. Homodonts are vertebrates that have only one type of teeth. The description of the types of teeth, their arrangement and specialization is called dentition. Herbivores are animals that feed exclusively on vegetation. They are grouped as grazers and browsers. Grazers, for example, cows, donkeys, and zebras feed on grasses, while browsers such as giraffes, goats, and antelopes feed on shrubs and herbs. Most herbivores do not have the upper incisors, but instead have a horny pad against which grass is pressed and cut by the lower incisors. The long tongue assists in the cutting and turning of grass and also moving the food during grinding. These functions are made possible by the diastema, and this is a gap in the lower jaw separating the canines and the premolars. The jaw moves side by side to enable premolars and molars grind food. Carnivores are animals that feed exclusively on flesh. Most carnivores are hunters. Some are adapted to fast running and have well-developed leg muscles that facilitate this movement. They also have strong jaws and sharp teeth to grasp their prey. Incisors are chisel-shaped and closely fitting to seize the prey. They are used for gripping and stripping flesh from the bone. Canines are long, conical, and curved to hold, kill, and tear the prey. Premolars and molars are small, except for special premolars in the lower and upper jaws, which are modified into carnassial teeth. The carnassial teeth have smooth sides and sharp edges to slice through flesh and crush bones. Jaws are attached to powerful muscles that move the jaws up and down by snapping. Omnivores are animals which feed on both vegetation and flesh. Humans are omnivores, and that being the case, they have 4 types of teeth. There are 4 incisors on each of the jaws. They are flat with sharp edges to bite and cut food. Canines are sharp and pointed for tearing food. Humans have 4 canines. After canines come the premolars. They are broad and flat. In total, humans have 8 premolars, 4 on each jaw. They are used to crack and ground food. Molars are bigger, flatter, and broader. Each jaw has 6 premolars, 3 on the left and 3 on the right side. They help to grind food into fine pieces ready for swallowing. Structure of the tooth. The basic tooth structure is similar in all teeth. The part of the tooth above the gum is called the crown. This is covered with a hard non-living layer called the enamel. Enamel is made up of calcium phosphate and carbonate. This is the part that grinds food. Underneath the enamel and down into the root, the tooth is made of pale yellow dentine. Although it's slightly less dense than the enamel, it's still harder than bone. Internally, the tooth is hollow to make room for blood vessels needed to keep the tooth alive by supplying nutrients and removing waste. This region of soft tissue is called the pulp. This is a schematic representation of the internal and external structure of the tooth. You see, the pulp cavity contains blood vessels and nerves. The nerves are important for sensitivity of heat, cold, and pain. Blood vessels ensure nourishment of the tooth. Next is digestion in humans. Now, while the food we eat contains all the food classes, minerals and vitamins, our body is incapable of using certain biomolecules such as carbohydrates and proteins in their original form. It therefore relies on the digestive system to break down the food and convert the biomolecules into smaller, simple and absorbable molecules. Our digestive system comprises of the alimentary canal or the gastrointestinal tract and the digestive glands. The alimentary canal is the long pathway through which food enters the body and the undigested solid waste are rejected. It includes organs such as the mouth, pharynx, the esophagus, stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, and the anus. The mouth is the anterior opening of the alimentary canal, leading to the oral cavity or the buccal cavity, which contains the teeth and the tongue. Each tooth is embedded in a socket of the jawbone and helps in chewing and breakdown of food. The tongue is a freely mobile muscular organ attached to the floor of the buccal cavity by the frenulum. The upper surface of the tongue is covered by the papilla, small projections arranged in a row, some of which have taste buds. The tongue helps in turning the food and pushing it into the pharynx, which is the passageway for air and food. The pharynx opens into the windpipe or trachea and esophagus. When the food moves into the pharynx and approaches the esophageal entrance, a flap of elastic tissue called the epiglottis closes the trachea, thus preventing the food from entering, which would cause choking. The esophagus conducts the food from the pharynx into the stomach. At the end of the esophagus lies the gastroesophageal sphincter, a one-way valve that allows food to enter the stomach but prevents it from regurgitating. The stomach, a J-shaped sac, is located in the upper left part of the abdominal cavity between the esophagus and the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. The stomach is made up of three major parts: the fundus, the cardiac, and the pyloric portion. At the end of the pyloric region lies the pyloric sphincter, which regulates the flow of the churned food from the stomach into the duodenum. The duodenum is followed by the jejunum and ileum, all three that make up the small intestine. While the duodenum is the short U-shaped portion, the jejunum is the long coiled portion. The ileum, on the other hand, is a long and highly coiled region that opens into the large intestine. The large intestine is divided into three regions: the cecum, colon, and rectum. The cecum, a small blind sac which holds some symbiotic microorganisms, is not much developed in humans as in ruminants. In humans, the cecum gives rise to a narrow finger-like tubular projection, the vermiform appendix, which is vestigial or functionless. The cecum opens into the colon, which is divided into an ascending, a transverse, and a descending colon. The descending part of the colon leads to the rectum, a bag-like structure which stores undigested food as fecal matter until it can be pushed out. The rectum leads to the last part of the gastrointestinal tract, the anus, which digests the undigested food materials. The innermost layer of tissues of the alimentary canal is called the mucosa and lines the lumen of the alimentary canal. It is an important layer as the mucosal epithelium has goblet cells which secrete mucus that helps in lubrication. In the stomach, the mucosa forms gastric glands and irregular folds called rugae. Whereas in the small intestine, the mucosa forms villi, small finger-like projections. The borders of the villi have a brush-like appearance as the cells lining the villi produce several microscopic projections called microvilli. Both villi and microvilli increase the surface area for absorption in the ileum. Villi also have a network of capillaries and a large lymph vessel called the lacteal. Apart from the alimentary canal, the digestive system also consists of the salivary glands, liver, and the pancreas, which are collectively known as the digestive glands. The salivary glands, located just outside the buccal cavity, secrete saliva into the cavity. There are three pairs of salivary glands: the parotid gland located in the cheek, the submandibular gland located in the lower jaw, and the sublingual gland located below the tongue. The liver, the largest gland in the body, is located in the abdominal cavity just below the diaphragm. It has two hepatic lobes and is made up of cells called hepatocytes arranged in the form of cords and which secrete bile. The bile passes through the hepatic duct and is stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. A duct emerging from the gallbladder, along with the hepatic duct from the liver, form the common bile duct, whose main function is to conduct the bile from the gallbladder into the duodenum. The pancreas, situated below the liver, is a compound and elongated organ consisting of exocrine and endocrine parts. While the exocrine portion secretes an alkaline pancreatic juice containing enzymes, the endocrine portion secretes hormones such as insulin and glucagon. The pancreatic duct, which carries the pancreatic juice from the exocrine portion, joins the common bile duct, and both of them open into the duodenum as the hepatopancreatic duct, which is guarded by the sphincter of Oddi. So we look at food digestion. Now, the digestion process begins when we put food in the mouth. The teeth mechanically breaks down the food in a process called mastication and reduces it in sizes that are easy to swallow and can be acted on by enzymes. The tongue mixes the food with saliva, which contains electrolytes such as sodium, potassium, chloride, and bicarbonate, and various enzymes such as salivary amylase and lysozyme. The salivary amylase hydrolyzes nearly 30% of starch into maltose. Lysozyme acts as an antibacterial agent and kills microbes in the food. The saliva also contains mucus. This lubricates the food and helps the masticated food particles to stick together to form a bolus. Thereafter, the bolus passes into the pharynx and then into esophagus by the process of swallowing. Once in the esophagus, a series of wave-like muscular contractions known as peristalsis pushes it down into the gastroesophageal sphincter, a one-way valve that conducts the bolus into the stomach. The bolus remains in the stomach for about 4 to 5 hours, where it mixes with the gastric juices secreted by the gastric glands. The presence of food in the stomach stimulates the secretion of the hormone gastrin, which in turn stimulates the secretion of gastric juice from the gastric glands. The layer has 3 main types of cells: the mucus goblet cells, which secrete mucus, chief cells, which secrete the enzyme pepsinogen and renin, and parietal cells, which secrete hydrochloric acid and intrinsic factor, a type of microprotein that absorbs the vitamin B complex. The churning of the stomach wall mixes the gastric secretions with the bolus, forming a pulp-like substance called chyme. During the churning, hydrochloric acid converts the inactive enzyme pepsinogen into an active enzyme, pepsin. Pepsin breaks down the proteins in the chyme into peptides. Although the hydrochloric acid is in high concentration, the lining of the stomach is not corroded as it is coated with mucus. The hydrochloric acid also kills any microbes present in the food. Renin enzyme digests the protein carcinogen in milk into casein or curd. This enzyme is abundant in young suckling babies. The chyme from the stomach passes through the pyloric sphincter and enters the duodenum. The arrival of food in the duodenum stimulates the secretion of the hormone secretin from the pancreas and cholecystokinin from the duodenal wall. Secretin stimulates the secretion of pancreatic juice into the duodenum, while cholecystokinin stimulates the secretion of bile from the gallbladder. These secretions contain various enzymes and help in the further breakdown of food materials. The pancreatic juice is alkaline and contains 3 digestive enzymes. Pancreatic amylase, which breaks down the remaining starch to maltose. Inactive enzyme trypsinogen, which is activated to trypsin, which in turn breaks down proteins into peptides. Pancreatic lipase, which breaks down lipids into fatty acids and glycerol. The pancreatic juice also contains sodium bicarbonate, which neutralizes the acidic chyme, thus creating an alkaline medium for enzyme action. The bile contains bile salts, sodium glycocholate, which break fat into tiny droplets in a process called emulsification. This increases the surface area for enzyme action. The food materials then move into the ileum. The arrival of chyme in the ileum stimulates the secretion of intestinal juice called succus entericus. The juice contains 4 enzymes which carry out digestive functions. Maltase, which speeds up the breakdown of maltose to glucose. Sucrase, which speeds up the breakdown of sucrose into glucose and fructose. And so, maltase and sucrase complete the digestion of carbohydrates. Peptidase, which breaks down the peptides into amino acids. And lipase, which breaks down lipids into fatty acids and glycerol. And so, the process of digestion is therefore completed in the ileum. After complex food has been broken down into smaller components, it needs to be absorbed into the bloodstream and lymph so that it can be transported throughout the body. Although absorption takes place in different parts of the alimentary canal, such as the mouth, stomach, small and large intestines, maximum absorption occurs in the ileum part of the small intestine. The villi on the ileum wall increases the surface area for absorption. They help to absorb the digested nutrients such as glucose, fructose, amino acids, and electrolytes. These nutrients pass through the intestinal mucosa into the bloodstream and are distributed throughout the body. Absorption takes place through passive and active transport. In passive transport, there is no expenditure of energy. There are 3 types of passive transport: simple diffusion, facilitated transport, and osmosis that assist in absorption. Small amounts of glucose, amino acids and electrolytes such as chloride ions generally move from a higher concentration to a lower concentration region by simple diffusion, whereas fructose and some amino acids are absorbed down a concentration gradient with the help of a specific carrier protein through facilitated diffusion. On the other hand, transport of water takes place from a dilute to a concentrated medium through osmosis. Absorption also takes place from a low to a high concentration medium through active transport, which is much quicker and requires energy. Nutrients such as sodium ions, glucose, galactose and amino acids are transported actively. Unlike carbohydrates and proteins, fats are not absorbed through the intestinal villi. Fatty acids and glycerol are insoluble in water and cannot therefore be absorbed by the intestinal wall directly. They are first acted on by bile salts to form small spherical droplets called micelles, which can easily move through the intestinal mucosa. As they enter the intestinal mucosa, they are coated with proteins to form small flat globules, the chylomicrons, which are transported into the lymph vessels called lacteoles in the villi. These lacteoles ultimately release the absorbed substances into the bloodstream. Other parts of the digestive system also play a role in the absorption process. For example, some drugs are placed in the mouth under the tongue so that they can be absorbed directly into the blood capillaries. The stomach wall directly absorbs certain foods, including simple sugars and alcohol. While water, some minerals such as potassium and sodium ions, and drugs are absorbed in the large intestines. These absorbed food substances are transported to different tissues of the body through the bloodstream. The ileum is where absorption of digested food substances occur, and it is adapted to its function in the following ways. It is long and therefore provides a large surface area for absorption. In addition, it is narrow so as to bring digested food materials into close contact with the walls of the ileum for easier absorption. It is highly coiled in order to slow down movement of food and that allow more time for digestion and absorption to take place. The inner surface of the ileum has large numbers of villi and microvilli, which increase the surface area for absorption. The ileum also has a thin layer of cells through which digested food diffuse. It also has a dense network of blood capillaries in the villi into which amino acids, sugars, vitamins, mineral salts, some fatty acids and glycerol are absorbed. This helps to maintain a steady diffusion gradient. It also has lacteoles in the villi for absorption of fatty acids and glycerols. The undigested and unabsorbed substances called feces enter the cecum region of the large intestine through the ileocecal valve. They then travel through the colon, which absorbs water, minerals and certain drugs in the feces. The colon also secretes mucus, which adheres the undigested particles together and also lubricates them for easy passage. The fecal matter enters the rectum, where it is temporarily stored till defecation. For proper coordination of different parts of the gastrointestinal tract, its activities are under hormonal and neural control. For instance, the sight, smell or thought of food leads to saliva secretion in the mouth. Assimilation. Now, assimilation is the incorporation of the products of digestion into the cell metabolism. The different food types are assimilated and utilized as follows. Glucose is oxidized to release chemical energy during respiration, and the excess is stored in the body as fats underneath the skin or in form of glycogen in liver or muscle cells. Fatty acids and glycerol are also oxidized to release energy, but most of the fatty acids and glycerol combine into neutral fats which are stored underneath the skin to insulate the body against cold. The amino acids are used in the synthesis of proteins for general body growth and repair of worn-out tissues. In the absence of fats and glucose, they can be used to release energy through oxidation. Now, if the digestive system does not function as smoothly as it should, it results in various types of disorders. Inflammation of the intestinal tract takes place when there are bacterial or viral infections. Parasitic infections are caused by tapeworms, roundworms, hookworms, pinworms, and others that usually infect the intestines. Indigestion takes place when food is not digested and one experiences a feeling of fullness, pain, or heartburn. This usually takes place due to inadequate enzyme secretions, anxiety, food poisoning, overeating, and spicy food. Constipation is another condition of the digestive system in which an individual has uncomfortable or infrequent bowel movements. Vomiting causes forceful contraction of the stomach and digestion of the stomach content through the mouth. This is preceded by a feeling of nausea. Diarrhea is a condition in which there is increased liquidity of the fecal discharge and bowel movements. It occurs when enough water is not removed from the stool, making the stool loose and poorly formed. Nutrition in single-cell organisms. Single-cell organisms like amoeba live in moist places where the entire cell is exposed to the surrounding. Simple materials like water and gases diffuse across the cell membrane, but complex materials have to be ingested. When an amoeba senses the presence of food, it moves closer to it. Finger-like projections called pseudopodia extend and surround the food, eventually encircling it. This forms the food vacuole. Digestive enzymes then move into the vacuole to digest the food particles.